The snow fell like whispered secrets, blanketing the small town of Havenwood in a hush that felt both sacred and suffocating. Elliot Weaver, barely 12, stood at the edge of the holiday market, his thin fingers clutching a sketchbook so worn its pages curled like autumn leaves. He didn't belong here, not among the laughter, the cider steam, or the glittering lights that made everyone else's eyes shine. Havenwood was a postcard of Americana, all picket fences and church steeples, but it had sharp edges for those who didn't fit its mold. Elliot knew this too well. His oversized coat, patched at the elbows, marked him as the foster kid, the one whispered about in grocery aisles. His dark curls fell into eyes that saw too much, and his silence screamed louder than words. Tonight, though, he wasn't here for the hot cocoa or the carolers. He was here for him, the man in the Santa suit who stood beneath the town square's Christmas tree, handing out candy canes with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Marcus Delaney was Havenwood's Santa, but not the jolly kind. At 42, he carried a quiet grace. His broad shoulders stooped under the weight of whispers. His Santa suit was threadbare, the red faded to a tired rose, but he wore it with defiance. Everyone knew Marcus, knew he lived alone in a small cabin at the edge of town, knew he'd once been a teacher before the rumor started. Gay, they hissed, as if the word were a curse. It had cost him his job, his friends, his place in Havenwood's heart. Now, he was Santa because no one else would take the gig, and the town let him play the part with a mix of pity and scorn. Elliot watched Marcus from across the square, sketching furiously. The pencil scratched out the curve of Marcus's jaw, the way his eyes crinkled when he handed a candy cane to a child who didn't flinch at his touch. Elliot didn't understand why people stared, why their smiles twisted into sneers when Marcus turned away. He only knew that Marcus was kind, and kindness was a rare thing in Elliot's world. "Freak," a voice muttered nearby. Elliot's pencil froze. Two teenagers, their faces half hidden under hoodies, stood a few feet away, smirking at Marcus. "Santa's a queer. Ain't that a joke?" one said, loud enough for heads to turn. The other laughed, tossing a snowball that missed Marcus but hit the tree, sending a shower of snow onto his hat. Marcus didn't react, just kept handing out candy, but Elliot saw his shoulders tense, saw the flicker of pain in his eyes. Elliot's chest burned. He wanted to scream, to throw something, but he was small, invisible. Instead, he flipped to a new page and sketched the teenagers, their cruel grins sharp as knives. He'd learned to capture the world in lines and shadows. It was safer than speaking. But tonight, something shifted. He tore the page out, crumpled it, and shoved it into his pocket. Then, heart pounding, he stepped toward Marcus. "Hey, kid," Marcus said softly as Elliot approached, his voice warm like a hearth fire. "Want a candy cane?" Elliot shook his head, his throat tight. He held out his sketchbook instead, flipping to the page with Marcus's face. It was rough but alive, every line filled with reverence. Marcus's eyes widened, then softened. "This is wow. You've got talent, kid." "Elliot," he whispered, the first word he'd spoken all night. "Elliot," Marcus repeated like it was a gift. "I'm Marcus. Nice to meet you." The moment hung between them, fragile as a snowflake. Then another snowball flew, this time grazing Marcus's arm. The teenagers laughed again, louder, and a few adults nearby exchanged glances, their silence louder than the jeers. Elliot's fists clenched. He didn't understand why Marcus didn't fight back, why he just stood there, taking it. "Don't let them get to you," Marcus said, his voice low, steady. "They're just scared of what they don't know." Elliot frowned. Scared of what? Marcus hesitated, then knelt so they were eye to eye. "Of different. Of me. Of who I am." Elliot didn't fully understand, but he felt the weight of it, the way Marcus's words carried years of hurt. He wanted to ask more, but a woman's sharp voice cut through the air. "Marcus, maybe you should go home. This isn't appropriate." It was Mrs. Hargrove, the mayor's wife, her lips pursed like she'd tasted something sour. Marcus stood, his smile gone. "Just doing my job, ma'am." "Your job," she scoffed, is making people uncomfortable. Elliot's heart raced. He wanted to yell at her, to tell her she was wrong, but his voice stayed locked inside. Marcus just nodded, tipped his Santa hat, and turned back to the kids still waiting for candy. But Elliot saw it, the tremble in his hands, the way his jaw tightened. That night, Elliot lay in his foster home's attic room, the sketchbook open on his chest. He couldn't stop thinking about Marcus, about the way the town treated him like he was less than human. He didn't know what gay meant, not really, but he knew what it felt like to be an outsider. He knew what it was to be unseen. The next morning, Havenwood woke to a new kind of snow, a flurry of whispers. Someone had spray-painted FAG across Marcus's cabin door in ugly red letters. The news spread like wildfire, and by noon, the holiday market was abuzz with gossip. Some called it a prank. Others said Marcus deserved it. Elliot overheard it all, his sketchbook heavy in his hands. He didn't go to the market that day. Instead, he sat by the frozen creek behind his foster home, sketching Marcus again, this time with a crown of light around his head, like a saint in the old paintings his foster mom kept on the walls. He didn't know it yet, but Elliot was about to change everything. He didn't know that a lonely boy with a pencil and a heart full of fire could make a town see love where they'd only seen shame. But he was starting to believe it was possible. Elliot's boots crunched through the snow as he trudged toward Marcus's cabin, his sketchbook tucked under his arm like a shield. The town was still buzzing about the graffiti, and he'd heard his foster mom, Mrs. Carter, muttering about troublemakers over breakfast. But Elliot wasn't thinking about the paint or the whispers. He was thinking about Marcus's face, the way it had crumpled for just a second when Mrs. Hargrove told him to leave the market. The cabin sat at the edge of Havenwood, where the pines grew thick and the streetlights didn't reach. It was small, weathered, with a sagging porch and a chimney puffing faint smoke. The red letters screamed across the door, jagged and cruel. Elliot's stomach twisted. He'd seen kids get bullied at school, seen the way words could cut deeper than fists, but this was different. This was hate carved into someone's home. He knocked, his knuckles barely making a sound. No answer. He knocked again, louder, and the door creaked open. Marcus stood there, still in his Santa jacket, a paint roller in one hand and a can of white paint at his feet. His eyes were tired, but he smiled when he saw Elliot. "Hey, kid. Didn't expect company." Elliot pointed at the door. "You're painting over it?" Marcus nodded, his smile fading. "Can't leave it like that. Neighbors already complain enough." Elliot's throat tightened. "It's not fair. Life's not fair," Marcus said, but there was no bitterness in his voice, just a quiet truth. He stepped aside. "Want to come in? It's warmer than standing out here." Inside, the cabin was cozy, cluttered with books and old records. A small Christmas tree sat in the corner, decorated with mismatched ornaments and a single strand of lights. Elliot's eyes caught on a photo above the fireplace. Marcus, younger, laughing with another man, their arms around each other. The other man had bright eyes and a wide grin, and they looked happy. Happier than anyone in Havenwood ever seemed. "Who's that?" Elliot asked, pointing. Marcus's face softened, then tightened. "That's James. My partner. Was my partner." Elliot didn't know what to say. He'd never heard someone say partner like that with so much weight. He wanted to ask more, but Marcus was already moving, offering him a mug of hot chocolate. "So, what brings you out here, Elliot? Not just to check on an old guy's paint job." Elliot hesitated, then opened his sketchbook. He flipped to the drawing of Marcus with the crown of light. "I made this. For you." Marcus took the sketchbook, his hand steady but his eyes glistening. "Elliot, it's beautiful. You see things most people don't." Elliot shrugged, embarrassed. "I just draw what I see." "And what do you see when you look at me?" Marcus asked, his voice gentle but searching. Elliot thought for a moment. "Someone who's good, even when people aren't good to you." Marcus set the sketchbook down, his jaw tight. "You're a good kid, Elliot. Don't let this town make you think otherwise." That night, Elliot couldn't sleep. He kept seeing the red letters, the photo of Marcus and James, the way Marcus's voice broke when he said was. He didn't know what it all meant, but he felt it, the ache of something lost, the sting of being hated for no reason. He flipped open his sketchbook and started drawing again, this time a scene from the market. Marcus as Santa, surrounded by kids, but with shadows creeping in from the edges, their faces twisted with judgment. The next day, Elliot went back to the holiday market. Marcus was there again, handing out candy canes, but the crowd was thinner, the air heavier. The graffiti had changed things. People whispered more openly now, their words sharp as icicles. "Disgrace," one man muttered. "Shouldn't be around kids," said another. Elliot's hands shook as he sketched, capturing every sneer, every sidelong glance. Then he saw them, the same teenagers from the first night, lingering near the hot cider stand. They were laughing, pointing at Marcus, and one of them held a can of spray paint. Elliot's heart pounded. He didn't think, just acted. He marched over, his small frame trembling with rage. "You did it, didn't you?" he shouted, loud enough for heads to turn. "You painted his door." The taller teenager, a boy named Kyle, smirked. "What's it to you, weirdo?" "You're a coward," Elliot spat, his voice cracking but fierce. "You hurt him because you're scared." Kyle's smirk faltered, but his friend stepped forward, shoving Elliot hard. The sketchbook fell into the snow, pages splaying open. The crowd went quiet, watching. Elliot scrambled to pick it up, his cheeks burning, but before he could, Marcus was there, his hand steady on Elliot's shoulder. "Enough," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. He looked at the teenagers, then at the crowd. "If you've got a problem with me, say it to my face. Leave the kid alone." No one spoke. The silence was deafening, broken only by the crunch of snow as Marcus helped Elliot up and handed him the sketchbook. "You okay?" he asked softly. Elliot nodded, but his eyes were on the crowd. They were watching, some with shame, others with defiance. He realized then that Marcus wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for Elliot, too, for the right to exist, to be seen. That night, Elliot made a decision. He couldn't fix Havenwood, but he could show them who Marcus really was. He stayed up late, sketching page after page. Marcus as Santa, Marcus laughing, Marcus with James. He didn't know how, but he was going to make the town see the truth. He was going to make them believe in love again. Elliot's fingers ached from gripping the pencil, but he didn't stop. The attic was freezing, the single bulb overhead flickering as he hunched over his sketchbook. Page after page filled with Marcus. Marcus smiling, Marcus alone, Marcus with that crown of light. Each drawing was a piece of story Elliot didn't yet know how to tell, but he felt its shape forming, like a melody he could hum but not sing. At school the next day, the whispers about Marcus were louder, sharper. Kids repeated what their parents said. "He's not right for Santa," or "he shouldn't be around us." Elliot kept his head down, his sketchbook hidden in his backpack. He wasn't ready to show anyone, not yet. But during lunch, he slipped into the art room, where Ms. Nguyen, the only teacher who didn't look at him like he was broken, let him work in peace. "Elliot, you're quiet today," Ms. Nguyen said, peering over her glasses. She was young, with a streak of blue in her hair, and she always smelled like paint. "Everything okay?" He hesitated, then pulled out his sketchbook and showed her the drawings of Marcus. Her eyes softened as she flipped through them. "These are powerful, Elliot. They feel personal. They're for someone," he mumbled. "Someone the town's being mean to." Ms. Nguyen nodded, like she understood more than he'd said. "Art can change minds, you know. It shows people what they're too stubborn to see." Her words stuck with him all day. By the time he reached the holiday market that evening, he had a plan. He'd show Havenwood who Marcus was, not the rumors, not the graffiti, but the man who gave out candy canes and knelt to talk to kids like they mattered. He just needed a way to do it. Marcus was at his usual spot, but the crowd around him was sparse. A few kids took candy canes, but their parents pulled them away quickly, their faces tight with disapproval. Elliot's chest ached. He approached Marcus, his sketchbook clutched tight. "I want to help," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Help with what, kid?" With them, Elliot gestured at the crowd. I want them to see you like I do. Marcus's smile was sad but warm. That's a tall order, Elliot. People hold on to their hate like it's all they've got. Then we'll give them something else, Elliot said, his voice fiercer than he felt. Marcus looked at him, really looked, and for a moment, Elliot thought he saw hope in his eyes. All right, Marcus said. What's your plan? Elliot didn't have all the pieces yet, but he knew it started with his drawings. He spent the next few days sketching everywhere. On the bus, in the cafeteria, by the creek. He drew Marcus as Santa, but also as a teacher, a friend, a man who loved and lost. He drew the photo of Marcus and James, their arms around each other, their smiles brighter than Havenwood's Christmas lights. Each sketch was a rebellion, a way to fight the ugliness he saw in the town. On Saturday, Elliot went to the market early, before the crowd arrived. He convinced Ms. Nguyen to let him use the school's printer to make copies of his drawings. He carried a stack of them, his heart pounding as he approached the community board near the Christmas tree. It was usually covered with flyers for bake sales and church events, but today, Elliot pinned up his sketches. They fluttered in the wind, Marcus's face staring out at the empty square. By noon, people noticed. A few stopped to look, their expressions unreadable. Some whispered, others walked away. Elliot stood nearby, pretending to sip cider, his stomach in knots. Then he saw Kyle, the teenager who'd pushed him, staring at the drawings. Kyle's face was hard, but his eyes lingered on the sketch of Marcus and James, the one with their arms around each other. What's this crap? Kyle muttered, but he didn't tear it down. He just stood there, and for the first time, Elliot saw something like doubt in his eyes. That evening, Marcus found Elliot by the board. You did this? He asked, his voice thick. Elliot nodded, bracing for anger. But Marcus just pulled him into a hug, quick and fierce. You're braver than I'll ever be, kid. The drawings didn't change everything. Not yet. People still whispered, still stared. But Elliot noticed something new. A few hesitant smiles, a couple of parents letting their kids linger near Marcus. It was small, but it was something. Then, on Sunday, disaster struck. Elliot arrived at the market to find the community board empty, his drawings gone. In their place was a single word, scrawled in red paint. Freak. His heart sank. He looked for Marcus, but he wasn't at his usual spot. Panic clawed at him. Had Marcus given up? Had the town won? He ran to the cabin, his breath hitching. The door was clean now, the graffiti gone, but Marcus wasn't there. The lights were off, the chimney cold. Elliot's eyes stung as he sat on the porch, his sketchbook heavy in his lap. He'd tried to help, and he'd failed. But as he opened the sketchbook, a new idea sparked. One so big, so risky, it scared him. He wasn't done fighting. Not yet. Elliot's breath fogged in the cold as he sat on Marcus's porch, his sketchbook open to a blank page. The missing drawings felt like a punch to the gut, but the word freak scrawled on the community board burned worse. He wanted to show Havenwood the truth about Marcus, but all he'd done was give the haters a bigger target. Still, something stubborn in him refused to quit. He started sketching, his pencil moving with a fury he didn't know he had. This time, it wasn't just Marcus, it was the whole town, the market, the Christmas tree, but with a twist. He drew Havenwood as it could be, with people smiling at Marcus, kids crowding around him, no shadows lurking in the corners. He didn't know how long he sat there, but when his fingers went numb, he heard footsteps. Ms. Nguyen appeared, her blue-streaked hair tucked under a knit cap. Elliot, what are you doing out here? It's freezing. They took my drawings, he said, his voice small. And Marcus is gone. Ms. Nguyen sat beside him, her eyes scanning the empty cabin. He's not gone for good. I saw him at the diner this morning. He's just hurting. Elliot's head snapped up. You talked to him? She nodded. He told me about your sketches. Said they were the first thing in years that made him feel seen. She paused, her gaze softening. You're doing something important, Elliot. Don't stop. Her words lit a fire in him. He didn't have a plan, not really, but he knew he needed to do something bigger than flyers on a board. He needed to make Havenwood listen. Over the next few days, he worked in secret staying late in the art room with Ms. Nguyen's help. He turned his sketches into a story, a comic book, each panel a piece of Marcus's life. He drew Marcus as a young teacher, laughing with students. Marcus with James, their love a quiet rebellion. Marcus as Santa, standing tall despite the town's scorn. The final pages showed Elliot himself, a small figure with a sketchbook, fighting for the man who'd shown him kindness. On Friday, the market was packed, the air thick with the scent of pine and cinnamon. It was the last weekend before Christmas, and Havenwood was in full holiday mode. Carolers singing, lights twinkling, the Christmas tree glowing like a beacon. Elliot's heart raced as he carried his stack of homemade comics, each one stapled together with care. He didn't pin them up this time. Instead, he handed them out, slipping them into shoppers' bags, leaving them on benches, even tucking one into the mayor's waistcoat pocket when she wasn't looking. By evening, the comics were everywhere. People read them in line for cider, passed them to friends, whispered over the pages. Elliot watched from a distance, his stomach in knots. Some faces softened as they read, others hardened. Mrs. Hargrove clutched her copy, her lips a thin line, but she didn't throw it away. Kyle and his friend were there too, flipping through the pages with grudging curiosity. Then Marcus arrived, his Santa suit brighter than usual, like he'd patched it up. He froze when he saw the comics, his eyes finding Elliot in the crowd. Elliot expected him to be angry, but Marcus just nodded, a small, proud smile on his lips. He took his place by the tree, handing out candy canes, and for the first time, more kids approached than stayed away. A little girl with pigtails hugged his leg, and her mom didn't pull her back. But the peace didn't last. Kyle's friend, a lanky kid named Derek, stormed up to Marcus, a comic crumpled in his fist. "This is garbage," he shouted, loud enough for the crowd to hush. "You're not some hero. You're enough." The voice was Ms. Nguyen's, sharp and fierce. She stepped between Derek and Marcus, her eyes blazing. "You don't get to decide who belongs here. Marcus has done nothing but give to this town, and all you've given him is hate." The crowd was silent, the air heavy. Derek backed off, muttering, but the damage was done. People were staring again, their whispers starting up like a swarm of bees. Elliot's heart sank. He thought the comics would change things, but maybe he'd only made it worse. Then a small voice broke the silence. "I like Santa," said the girl with pigtails, still clinging to Marcus's leg. Her mom, a tired-looking woman in a worn coat, hesitated, then spoke. "He's always been kind to my daughter. That's what matters." A murmur rippled through the crowd. A few nodded, others looked away. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall Havenwood had built around Marcus. Elliot felt it, the shift, the possibility. He looked at Marcus, who was watching the crowd with something like hope in his eyes. That night, Elliot sat in the attic, his sketchbook open but untouched. He was exhausted, but his mind was racing. The comics had done something, but they weren't enough. He needed to go bigger, to make the town see Marcus not just as Santa, but as a person who loved, who hurt, who deserved better. And he knew exactly how to do it. Elliot's plan was reckless, maybe even crazy, but it was all he had. The holiday market's final night was Christmas Eve, the biggest event in Havenwood, when the whole town gathered for the tree lighting ceremony. If he was going to make them see Marcus, it had to be then, in front of everyone. He spent every spare moment in the art room, working with Ms. Nguyen to create something bigger than his comics. A mural, a massive canvas that would tell Marcus's story in a way no one could ignore. The mural was a gamble. Elliot poured everything into it. Marcus as a young man, teaching kids to love books. Marcus and James, dancing under a starry sky. Marcus as Santa, his face lit with kindness despite the shadows around him. Elliot added himself, too, a small figure with a sketchbook, standing beside Marcus, their hands almost touching. Ms. Nguyen helped him stretch the canvas, mix the paints, and plan how to display it. "This is brave, Elliot," she said, "but it's going to make people angry." "Let them be angry," he said, his voice steady for the first time in weeks. They need to see. Christmas Eve arrived, the air crisp and electric. The market was a sea of faces, all bundled in scarves and coats, their breath visible onto the streetlights. The Christmas tree loomed over the square, unlit, waiting for the mayor's signal. Elliot and Ms. Nguyen worked in secret, setting up the mural on a makeshift easel near the tree. They covered it with a tarp, its presence unnoticed in the chaos of the crowd. Marcus was there, handing out candy canes, but his eyes were distant. Elliot hadn't told him about the mural. He didn't want Marcus to stop him. He'd seen the toll the past weeks had taken, the way Marcus's smiles grew rarer, his shoulders heavier. Elliot's chest ached with the need to fix it, to make Havenwood see what he saw. As the mayor stepped forward to light the tree, Elliot's heart pounded. He climbed onto a bench, his small frame barely visible in the crowd. Ms. Nguyen gave him a nod, and together they pulled the tarp off the mural. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The canvas was huge, its colors vivid under the market lights. Marcus's face, James's smile, the love and pain woven into every brushstroke. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the whispers started, a low hum that grew into a roar. "What is this?" someone shouted. "Disrespectful," cried another. But others were quiet, their eyes locked on the mural, taking it in. Elliot's voice shook as he climbed higher, standing on the bench's backrest. "This is Marcus," he yelled, his words cutting through the noise. "He's not what you say he is. He's kind, and he's good, and you're wrong about him." The crowd stilled. Marcus froze, his eyes wide as he saw the mural. Elliot kept going, his voice cracking but fierce. "You call him names, you hurt him, but he still shows up. He still gives you candy canes, still plays Santa for your kids. Why do you hate him for who he loves?" Mrs. Hargrove pushed through the crowd, her face red. "This is outrageous. Take that down." But before she could reach the mural, the little girl with pigtails ran forward, her mom trailing behind. "I love Santa," she shouted, pointing at Marcus. Her mom hesitated, then stepped up. "Elliot's right. Marcus has never been anything but kind. Maybe we're the ones who need to change." A murmur spread, louder now. A man in a flannel jacket, someone Elliot recognized from the hardware store, spoke up. "I knew James. He was a good man. Marcus didn't deserve what happened to him." More voices joined in, some angry, some soft. Kyle was there too, his face unreadable. He didn't speak, but he didn't look away from the mural. Elliot's hands shook as he climbed down, his eyes on Marcus, who was staring at the canvas like it was a mirror to his soul. Then Marcus spoke, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "I love James. I want to apologize for that. And I love this town, even when it doesn't love me back." He paused, his eyes finding Elliot. "This kid, he sees more than all of you. He sees what matters." The mayor, a gray-haired man who'd stayed silent until now, stepped forward. "Enough," he said, but his voice wasn't harsh. He looked at the mural, then at Marcus. "Maybe it's time we listened." The tree lit up then, a burst of gold and red that bathed the square in light. The crowd didn't cheer, not like they usually did. They were too busy looking at the mural, at Marcus, at each other. Elliot felt tears on his cheeks, but he didn't wipe them away. He'd done what he came to do. Now it was up to Havenwood. The Christmas tree's lights cast a warm glow over the market, but the air felt different, heavier, charged with something unspoken. Elliot stood by the mural, his heart still racing from his outburst. He'd expected to feel triumphant, but instead he felt raw, exposed. The crowd was still murmuring, some faces soft with guilt, others hard with defiance. Marcus stood beside him, his Santa hat clutched in his hands, his eyes fixed on the mural like it was a lifeline. Mrs. Hargrove wasn't done. She stormed toward the mayor, her voice sharp. "This is a disgrace. We can't have this propaganda at our Christmas celebration." The mayor raised a hand, his face tired. "It's not propaganda, Evelyn. It's art, and it's the truth." The crowd shifted, some nodding, others whispering. Elliot saw Kyle at the edge of the group, his comic still in his hand. He looked conflicted, his usual smirk on. Elliot wanted to hate him, but he couldn't. Not when he saw the way Kyle's eyes kept drifting to the mural, to the panel of Marcus and James dancing under the stars. Then a new voice spoke, soft but clear. "I owe you an apology, Marcus." It was Mr. Thompson, the hardware store owner, his flannel jacket dusted with snow. "I didn't know James well, but I knew he made you happy. I should have said something when the rumors started." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Thank you, Tom. That means more than you know." More voices followed, tentative at first. A woman who ran the bakery admitted she'd turned Marcus away when he applied for a job. A man who'd coached Little League with Marcus years ago said he regretted staying silent when the school fired him. Each confession was a pebble, small but heavy, building a path toward something new. Elliot watched, his chest tight with hope and fear. He'd wanted this, but it felt too fragile, like a snowflake that could melt under the weight of Havenwood's history. Then he felt a hand on his shoulder. Ms. Nguyen, her eyes shining. "You did this, Elliot. You made them see." But not everyone was swayed. Mrs. Hargrove and a few others stood apart, their faces like stone. "This town has standards," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We don't need this kind of display." Before anyone could respond, the little girl with pigtails ran to Marcus, holding out a candy cane. "You dropped this, Santa," she said, her voice bright. The crowd laughed, a nervous sound that broke the tension. Her mom stepped forward, her eyes meeting Marcus's. "Thank you for being kind to her," she said. "And I'm sorry for not speaking up sooner." Marcus knelt, taking the candy cane with a smile that finally reached his eyes. "You're welcome, kiddo. And thank you, both of you." The moment shifted something in the crowd. More people approached Marcus, some with apologies, others with quiet thanks. A few kids asked for candy canes, their parents standing close instead of pulling them away. It wasn't perfect. Elliot still saw the glares, the whispered judgments, but it was a start. That night, Marcus invited Elliot and Ms. Nguyen to his cabin. The Christmas tree inside glowed softly, and the photo of Marcus and James seemed to shine brighter. Marcus poured hot chocolate, his hands steadier than Elliot had ever seen. "I don't know how to thank you, kid," he said, his voice thick. "You gave me something I thought I'd lost." Elliot shrugged, embarrassed. "I just drew what I saw." Ms. Nguyen laughed. "You did more than that. You showed Havenwood what courage looks like." They talked late into the night, Marcus telling stories about James, how they'd met at a bookstore, how James loved jazz and bad puns. Elliot listened, his sketchbook open, capturing Marcus's face as he spoke, the lines softer now, less burdened. For the first time, Elliot felt like he belonged somewhere, like he wasn't just a foster kid with no voice. But Havenwood wasn't done with its struggles. The next morning, Elliot woke to find a new flyer pinned to the community board, a petition to ban Marcus from playing Santa next year. Mrs. Hargrove's name was at the top, along with a dozen others. Elliot's heart sank, but he wasn't surprised. Change didn't come easy, not in a town like this. He found Marcus at the diner, sipping coffee, the flyer in front of him. "They're not giving up," Marcus said, his voice calm but tired. "Then neither do we," Elliot said, his fists clenched. He didn't know what came next, but he knew he wouldn't let Marcus face it alone. They'd fought this far together, and they'd keep fighting, until Havenwood learned to love again. The petition stung like a fresh wound, but Elliot refused to let it win. Christmas was over, but Havenwood's battle was just beginning. He sat in the attic, his sketchbook open, sketching a new vision, not just of Marcus, but of the town. He drew the market without shadows, the Christmas tree surrounded by people holding hands, Marcus at the center with a smile that didn't hide pain. It was a dream, but dreams were where change started. He showed the sketch to Ms. Nguyen the next day. "We need to do something," he said. "Something bigger than the mural." She nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "The town council meets tomorrow. They're discussing the petition. Maybe it's time to show up. Not just you, but everyone who's starting to see Marcus differently." Elliot spent the day rallying support. He went to the little girl's mom, to Mr. Thompson, to the baker who'd apologized. He showed them his new sketch, his voice shaking but clear. Marcus deserves to be Santa. He deserves to be here. Help me tell them. By evening, he had a small group. Ms. and Gwen, the little girl and her mom, Mr. Thompson, and a few others who'd read his comics or seen the mural. It wasn't a crowd, but it was enough. They agreed to meet at the town hall, their faces nervous but determined. The council meeting was packed, the air thick with tension. Mrs. Hargrove stood at the podium, her voice sharp as she read the petition. Marcus Delaney is not fit to represent our town's values, she said. We need a Santa who reflects who we are. Elliot's heart pounded as he stood, his sketchbook under his arm. Ms. Nguyen squeezed his shoulder, and he stepped forward, his voice small but steady. You're wrong about Marcus, and you're wrong about what Havenwood is. The room went quiet. Mrs. Hargrove's eyes narrowed, but Elliot kept going. I'm just a kid. I don't belong anywhere. But Marcus saw me. He was kind when no one else was. That's what Havenwood should be, kind to everyone, no matter who they love. He opened his sketchbook, holding up the drawing of the town without shadows. This is what we could be. If you let Marcus be Santa, you're saying we can be better. You're saying we can love each other, even when we're different. The little girl's mom stood next. My daughter loves Marcus. He's never been anything but good to her. That's what matters. Mr. Thompson spoke too, his voice gruff. I've known Marcus for years. He's a better man than most of us. More voices joined in, each one a crack in Havenwood's wall of judgment. The council listened, their faces unreadable. Mrs. Hargrove tried to interrupt, but the mayor raised a hand. Let them speak, he said. Then Marcus stood. He looked tired but unbroken, his Santa jacket folded over his arm. I don't need to be Santa, he said. I just want to live here, same as you. I want to be seen for who I am, not what you think I am. Elliot's shown me that's possible. Maybe he can show you too. The council voted that night. It wasn't unanimous, but it was enough. Marcus would stay on as Santa. Mrs. Hargrove stormed out, but others stayed, some approaching Marcus with quiet apologies, others just nodding, like they were seeing him for the first time. The next year, Havenwood's holiday market felt different. Marcus was there, his Santa suit new and bright, his smile real. Kids crowded around him, their parents smiling instead of whispering. Elliot stood nearby, his sketchbook full of new drawings, Havenwood, as it was now, not perfect but trying. He'd found a home that winter, not just in Marcus's cabin, where he spent more and more time, but in the town itself. Havenwood wasn't fixed, not completely. There were still whispers, still glares. But there were also hands extended, apologies offered, hearts opened. Elliot looked at Marcus, laughing with a kid on his knee, and felt something warm bloom in his chest. He'd come to the market a year ago as a lonely boy with a sketchbook, invisible to the world. Now, he was part of something bigger, a story of love, of courage, of a town learning to believe again. And as the snow fell, soft and quiet, he knew they'd keep writing that story together.